Well, trade talks have surrounded Zach LaVine all offseason. On today's episode, I want to talk about it and ask the question: can Zach LaVine actually silence his doubters next season and prove what he's been throughout his season? And that is one of the more efficient scorers in the NBA. And while we've been talking about X factors and positives, let's talk about some of the red flags on the Chicago Bulls team heading into next season. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. And by the way, I got my favorite mic back. I had to send this mic out for repair. I know not everybody cares about mics, but should up the production quality a little bit. Can't use typical mics. This is one of the more expensive mics that you'll find. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter. With that said, listen, let's go ahead and get into this content, man. So I want to talk about Zach LaVine. And, I've talked and touched a little bit on this, and we've talked a lot about, like, Zach LaVine's trade value and the way that he's viewed around the league and things like that. But Zach LaVine is not nearly as bad as what's the conversation that has become around Zach LaVine. And while I've always explained it as a Venn diagram, right? It's the production plus injury concerns and contract. And those three things are overlapping right now to where it's causing teams to not be in on Zach LaVine. And I understand that, right? But even outside of the trade value, I just want to talk about the positive of Zach LaVine. If Zach LaVine can get back to being the player that he was. Between 2019 to 2023, the only reason I'm not using the part of 2024 is because he was injured. So, I'm taking that out of it. And even then, he did have, those nagging injuries over those years that I'm giving. But from 2019 to 2023, there have only been 9 players to score more points in the NBA than Zach LaVine. That's Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, Trae Young, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Devin Booker, DeMar DeRozan, and Donovan Mitchell. And then it is Zach LaVine there at number 10. And prior to last season, he was on a 3-year run of scoring and having a true shooting percentage of 60% or more. And 4 straight years of having a positive plus-minus when he's on the court. So Zach LaVine is not nearly as bad of a player as what people are now talking about him as. And while the concerns around Zach LaVine are very much legitimate, make no mistake about it, and I know the doubt around him really isn't scoring, is what he can do otherwise. And I know a lot of people are going to go to defense, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because I want to compare him to a player, right? And this is where it goes to the perception aspect of it. A player that Zach LaVine has at what point was talked around a lot, right? As far as them being similar until Devin Booker took his career to the next level. But when you look at it offensively, Zach LaVine has a career true shooting percentage of 57.8%. Devin Booker is slightly above him at 61.1%. When you also look at the shot quality that they take, Zach LaVine is the 85th percentile of quality shots that he's taking. Now, part of that is just because he can hit difficult shots. And he has a grade on shot quality of 73, whereas Devin Booker has 75. When you look at the free throw rate on top of all those things as well, Devin Booker does get to the line more efficiently at 35% free throw rate, whereas Zach LaVine has a 27%. You look at three-point attempt rate, Zach LaVine is 12% higher than Devin Booker at 44.9%, whereas Devin Booker's at 32%. Take that for what you will. And then you get into the other things, the shot creation aspect of it. That's where Devin Booker starts to separate himself, definitely from Zach LaVine. He per 100 shots, Devin Booker creates way more shots for his teammates at 97. He's in the 97th percentile and a grade of 11.6. Zach LaVine is only in the 79th percentile at 5.5. So, of course, passing, Devin Booker is a much better passer. Devin Booker also has a passer rating of 7.1, whereas Zach LaVine only has a 4.6. But then you get into the defensive aspect of it. Zach LaVine is a better defender by Devin Booker by every measurable statistic and metric. When you look at deflections, Zach LaVine is in the 33rd percentile in deflections, which is not good. Devin Booker's in the 21st. When you look at the defensive rebounding aspect of it, Zach LaVine has a 64% defense. He's in the 64th percentile of defensive rebounds, which is excellent for a guard. Make sure you remember that. Whereas Devin Booker is in the 8th percentile. Now, Devin Booker has already also played with much better rebounders for the majority of his career, but there you go with that as well. Then when you look at the block percentage, Zach LaVine has a 0.9 block percentage, which is right there with Devin Booker's. And then when you look at also the personal fouls, Devin Booker fouls at a much higher rate than what Zach LaVine does. He actually fouls at almost double the rate that Zach LaVine does. What am I using this to say? I'm using this just to specifically say the fact that there are players that are just as bad defenders as Zach LaVine that still don't get kind of the criticism that Zach LaVine gets. And while Zach LaVine, yes, is a bad defender that we know, especially on ball, he's pretty solid off ball, actually. He's more solid on ball. He gets blown up off ball. The fact of the matter is that Zach LaVine is not nearly as bad as what the conversation has been around him. Now, with that said, Zach LaVine also hasn't won in many games, and Devin Booker is a better player. Make no mistake about it. I am in no way trying to have this conversation to say that Zach LaVine is a better player than Devin Booker. I'm just there to say that the difference between them is not that great, but Devin Booker is a better player, right? And so when you look at it, Zach LaVine can still help this team. And if a team is looking for a scorer at the trade deadline, what I've just talked about it, the top 10 scorers since 2019, Zach LaVine is right there. Right there. And so the only other player that could be available at the trade deadline potentially that if you're looking for scorers, maybe Trae Young, maybe the Atlanta Hawks are looking to move on from him, but Luka isn't being moved. Giannis isn't being moved. They're definitely not trading Jason Tatum. Nikola Jokic isn't going anywhere. Joel Embiid isn't going anywhere with what they've done. Devin Booker isn't going anywhere. DeMar DeRozan just signed with that team. And Donovan Mitchell, maybe you can throw Donovan Mitchell in there. But the fact of the matter still remains, Zach LaVine is one of, or could be the best scorer on the market if you're looking for a scorer at the trade deadline. Now, again, you have to also hope that you have enough of a defensive upside with your team to kind of overlook that. But then let's talk about if Zach LaVine stays, right? The questions around Zach LaVine staying is, will he be truly locked in next season? And I think that he will. Zach LaVine, I think, has heard a lot of the doubt and hate and will be motivated to kind of try to prove people wrong. I don't even know if it's necessarily just to recoup his trade value, but he will be looking to increase his role and prove those doubters that have been going off on him all offseason that they're wrong. Then you have to ask yourself as well, as far as how it affects the Bulls. Will Zach LaVine embrace a role of empowering the young guys, similar to what DeMar DeRozan did, especially in the second half of last season? DeMar DeRozan picked his spots much better in the second half of the season, still went off in fourth quarters, but he really allowed Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu and those guys to really take the bull by the horns and kind of run that offense for a while he facilitated more. But then, like I said, picked his spots, went on his runs, things like that. Can we see Zach LaVine doing a similar role like that to where he's still getting his shots up, but it's about how and where you get your shots while you're also allowing guys like Kobe to flourish, maybe Patrick Williams to get a little bit more opportunities, Modest Bucilis if he shares the court with Zach LaVine a lot, right? And then Kobe and LaVine's minutes together, how productive are those minutes going to be for those guys together on the court is another big question around Zach LaVine, also that he would have to answer because don't make no mistake about it. With Kobe's rise, people are absolutely going to be looking at it and saying, can Kobe and Zach exist together? And if you're looking to trade for Zach LaVine because you're not looking for Zach to be your number one option, you're looking for him to either be your second or your third option if a team does try to make a move for Zach LaVine. And so teams are going to be looking to see how LaVine fits in with a player like Kobe White who's on the rise. And Josh Giddey could definitely help with that. If Zach LaVine stays on the Chicago Bulls team, and we're talking about maybe even past the trade deadline to where he ends the season with the Chicago Bulls, he can help the team. But what Zach has to get back to doing is being the efficient scorer that he was. And this team is already going to be a net negative defensively. I think the defense is going to be ugly on this team unless we see Kobe take a leap, Patrick Williams become damn near generational defensively, those type of things. And then, of course, we got a lot of defensive bench depth for sure, and how those players help as well with the Bulls' overall defense. But so that's really what you're looking at when it comes to Zach. And I think coming into next season, one of the bigger question marks that we have to talk about is just how Zach LaVine will impact that. And then the drama with the teammates. That's something that has been talked about a little bit more lately that I'm not really worried about. And maybe I'm wrong for that. I'm not worried at all about Zach LaVine causing drama for his teammates. His teammates like him. Zach LaVine likes them. It's never really been the teammates. Of course, he wants better teammates around him, but it's not like he hasn't liked the guys. He's not out there doing the Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade to the young guys. He actually embraces them, right? At least off the court. Bigger question is Billy Donovan in him. So I guess we'll see how that rounds out for the team heading into next year. But, that's just kind of my thought process that I wanted to talk about. Let's see how you guys feel about it. But the question is, just to bring it all together, can Zach LaVine silence his doubters next season to any degree. It doesn't have to be to a great degree or whatever else, but will he do that? Or will we be looking back at a Zach LaVine that maybe gets injured again? Or maybe he comes in and doesn't fit in well and he's not playing well? Like, what do you expect Zach LaVine, or what do you hope to see from Zach LaVine? Let me know that down below. Now, with that said, I wanted to talk about something. I've talked a lot of positives. Talk about X factors that could be for the Chicago Bulls, how players can step into the roles, how the starting five could work out. But I want to talk about what are some of the potential biggest red flags and things that can go left for the Chicago Bulls heading into next season. And the thing that I want to focus on it's going to be multiple topics, but the first one that I'm going to bring up is what if Josh Giddey is more like more like last season with the OKC Thunder than the 2022-23 season. Keep in mind, averaged almost a triple-double. What was it, like 16, 8, and 6 or something like that in 2022-23. And, of course, as Bulls fans, and the Bulls themselves are hoping that Josh Giddey can get back to being more like that, because what he can do facilitating, what he can do playmaking-wise. I talked a lot yesterday about how similar to Lauri Markkanen, right? And Lauri Markkanen played with the national team before he joined the Utah Jazz and took that and ran off with it with the Jazz, off to a Most Improved Player of the Year award. Could Josh Giddey do that is what we're hoping, but what if Josh Giddey isn't good? And the reason why that's a big question is that the Bulls traded one of their best assets in Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey straight up, but then also you have to make a contract decision on Josh Giddey by the end of this season. And so if Josh Giddey comes into this season for the Chicago Bulls and just isn't good or looks outright bad, that would be extremely bad for the Bulls, that you started your rebuild off, and the first move that you made in that rebuild did not work out for you. Now, the Bulls, I think, would still re-sign Josh Giddey, probably try to negotiate, because at that point he'd have coming off 2 bad seasons, and you're going to try to negotiate maybe a better deal. But it'd be remiss not to say that is not something that could be a red flag for this Bulls team. And maybe red flag isn't the best term here. Maybe it's just a sign for concern. But Josh Giddey, I do think, and I want to be clear, and anything that I'm bringing up in these concerns, red flags, is just potential. It's not saying that I think that this is what will happen, or I'm even saying that this is the most likely scenario. These are just things that I'm worried about. Lights haven't been on. Well, the lights haven't been on at all this episode. That's just bad. That's just bad business. It's not even a Chicago Bulls Central episode without the lights. But with that said, people are going to worry and have that concern over, can Josh Giddey, get back to that what we saw. And I do think that he can, but if he does not, that would be a big red mark on the Chicago Bulls team and a black eye for a franchise that went in basically on Zach LaVine. Now, one could say, well, Haize, even if Josh Giddey does not work out, you still got Kobe White there. You can move him back to the point, whatever else. Yeah, that is definitely a possibility. But it is a concern that, and I have to put that up there, because while I don't think it, and from what I've seen from Josh Giddey, the way he moves around the court, things like that, he's going to create open shots for his teammates. It still is, like I said, be remiss, and I wouldn't be being thorough if I didn't bring up the chance of that happening. The next one, what if Modest just isn't good? And not to say this isn't about Modest and just trying to make a determination on his career off one season, but if Modest Bucilis has a bad rookie year to where he just doesn't look good, it's more the concern from Bulls. Bulls fans are going to riot and panic, and it's going to be the sky is falling Bulls fans all over again if Modest Bucilis does not have a good rookie year. Like, we haven't seen players have bad rookie seasons and then bounce back from it. But to the understanding of those same Bulls fans, this Bulls front office, their first ever draft pick was Patrick Williams for this team. And it would be an understatement maybe to say that a lot of Bulls fans have been disappointed in the way that Patrick Williams has progressed. And then so to start your rebuild off with your first draft pick in that going younger direction, for Modest Bucilis to not look good and just look like a player that maybe doesn't belong in that first year, which, again, these things aren't things that I'm worried about, but these are things that maybe could happen. I do think that could be a sign that Bulls fans would go off, and it would be another triggering event for Bulls fans. And you don't want that to happen. I think Bucilis is going to have a very specialized role in the sense that the Bulls are going to try to put him in positions to just go out there, do what you do best. I think him and Josh Giddey are going to play really, really well together on top of all of that. But if Modest does look like that shot, the size maybe is a problem for him. He can't get that separation. He can't get to the lane like he's done in the G League and in Summer League. I do think that is going to be a sign for concern that is going to cause some Chicago Bulls fans to start worrying. Now, I don't think that you can make a story on a player. Like, I'm one of the guys who say, let's not try to write off Dalen Terry as a bust yet. But unfortunately, if you've been in this Bulls fan community for a while, you know that Bulls fans, they freak the fuck out. Just to be 100% honest with you, they will freak out. And if Bustelis comes into next season and throughout his whole rookie year looks more like he just can't get it going, it's definitely going to be a riot for Bulls fans. And then the next one, Zach LaVine and what he calls actual chemistry issues. I talked a little bit about this in the last segment. I'm just going to say it's a concern from the front office reportedly. I don't know. I haven't talked to him. But I'm not too worried about it. I'm just not too worried about it. I think that Zach LaVine is going to fit in. I think that even if Zach wants to be moved, or if he even wants to stay here, the best case scenario for him is to fit in. And that just is what it is. Even if you want to go to another team, this is your opportunity to show that you can play a complementary role while still being prioritized in the offense. Because despite what some Bulls fans say in these comments, because some of y'all is crazy, Zach LaVine is still getting his shots. He's just going to get his shots. They're going to run offense for him, and he got to be effective in that. And so hopefully that doesn't. But the biggest red flag in all of it, outside of the players, the Modest Bustelis, Josh Giddey not being right, the Zach LaVine potentially causing chemistry issues, even Nikola Vucevic maybe aging another 5 years like he did last year. But the biggest one to me that I have, and this is actually a red flag, is Billy Donovan. I think that Billy Donovan has to be one of the biggest concerns, not only because you are starting off your rebuild with having the same coach that hasn't really developed guys well. Now, I will say this. The thought process that a lot of people say of, well, Billy Donovan doesn't play rookies, really doesn't hold weight. Patrick Williams played right away. Ayo Dosunmu played right away. Julian Phillips played in his rookie year, but again, we knew that Julian Phillips was raw in a second-round pick. The only player that really, the only two players that rookies under Billy Donovan that haven't really played was Dalen Terry because of how raw Dalen Terry was. We always knew that part of his first year of development was going to be in the G League. Now, we hope that it was going to be more of the second. And then Marko Simonovic. But Marko's out the league. Marko just wasn't good. And that's what I think it boils down to. Marko Simonovic was just not good. And that's the biggest thing there. So I think sometimes we overstate the concern about him not playing rookies. Because if you look at it, he's actually played more rookies earlier than he is not. But at the same time, I get that. But it's the development aspect. The fact that Billy Donovan doesn't always put players in the proper position. And we're talking about vets. We're talking about people that you have years of data to say that these are what their strengths are, and you don't run options or plays for those strengths. Still, Zach LaVine is one of the best catch-and-shoot players in the NBA. And we don't run very many catch-and-shoot opportunities for Zach LaVine ever, right? That is a red flag on coaching. And so Billy Donovan's coaching, and I know Winton, shout out to the Winton Mahorn segment, Winton's going to love this, but it's just real. The concern around Billy Donovan and his coaching is one of the biggest red flags for this basketball team because we just don't know. Now, there are some people that hold out hope, and they look at how he developed Shea early, Lou Dort, those type of things. How in a year where everybody thought Chris Paul was washed up, he coached that team to get to the playoffs, I believe, right? So Billy Donovan has been a good coach in his career. The question is can he be a good coach for this team and this version now of the team, specifically as he's lost one of his safety nets in DeMar DeRozan, right? But the credit part that we've always seen best from Billy Donovan is when he has a point guard playing at a high level, and if Josh Giddey can play at a high level, maybe you're not too concerned about it. But that is a big concern for me heading into next season is as we're going younger, is Billy Donovan going to coach a style and allow these young guys to play in their strengths to be able to get the most out of this going younger team? And that's something that we won't see anytime soon until we're on the basketball court. And then even then, we got to see it sustained over time. Now, the month of December for the Bulls, how that team played with Zach and DeMar was out, when Kobe and Ayo and Patrick Williams are all playing really well, that gives some positives there, right? It gives some signs that this could work out. But we just got to see it be consistently. But I still think Billy Donovan is one of the biggest red flags on this team just because we haven't seen it yet on this roster, and maybe that we do. Now, before we leave as well, I want to talk about the Bulls being listed as one of the losers of free agency by Bleacher Report. And all I'll say is this, like this Bleacher Report article that called the Chicago Bulls losers actually were more favorable on their deals. Even when you look at it, they liked the Josh Giddey trade. They liked getting Josh Giddey as a player. They more so marked it as a negative, as many people did, with the fact that you did not get any draft picks back. But they seem pretty up on Josh Giddey coming in as a team. Facilitating the DeMar DeRozan sign-and trade. They actually liked the fact that the Bulls were able to get a sign-and trade for DeMar DeRozan, who was an unrestricted free agent. But then they mentioned how the Bulls put themselves in a situation by signing Jalen Smith early that they weren't able to take on bad salary, and thus the unprotected pick swap in 2031 actually went to the Spurs over the Bulls. So another thing where they made the right move in getting a sign and trade, but the way that they executed it left them in a position where it's questionable, right? And then they did mark the fact that Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic are still on the roster with a team that's clearly trying to go younger, but they did also like the draft pick of Modest Bucilis. So while they did mark the Bulls as one of the losers of free agency, they're actually more positive than not on most of the Bulls deals. It's just not getting maybe as much back in some of those deals. And I like the fact that they also wrote this article not from the perspective of, well, you could have got 3 first-round picks had you traded them at the trade deadline. They looked at what it was for this time in reality and judged it based off that. And even then, they narrowly almost didn't even make the list as one of the losers, who definitely weren't going to be a winner either, but be middle of the pack. And I think that ultimately that this offseason could be a win for the Bulls, but it's not probably going to be one that we look at as a win right away. If Modest Bucilis works out, that's going to make that could go a long way in making this a win. If Josh Giddey does look more like what he did in 2022-23, then we could look back on that deal extremely more favorably over time. And we also got to see, does Alex Caruso stay with the OKC Thunder when he's an unrestricted free agent, right? If AC does leave there and Josh Giddey also looks good in the Bulls uniform and we lock him into a deal, that kind of makes that deal look a little bit more favorable, right? At least maybe in hindsight. But at least right now, and you guys know, I graded the Bulls offseason overall at a C-. I was more favorable. The draft pick of Modest Bucilis did a lot for that. The signing of Jalen Smith as well for the money, I like a lot. He still has a lot of upside as well, even as a floor spacer. So those are deals that I was overall positive on. But the Bulls are going to be listed as a loser for this free agency for a long time. But we see what it ends up turning out to for over time. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.